The water below the ship began to move. Not waves. Shadows. Circling. Dozens of them. Dark fins slicing through the surface like blades. The couple stood at the railing, frozen, watching the ocean come alive with predators. And in that moment, they realized something terrifying. This was no accident. The sharks weren't passing by. They were waiting. How long can two people survive when the ocean itself has turned against them? When every second could be their last. This is their story. 6 days earlier, Sarah and Michael had been standing on a dock in Fiji, laughing. The sun was warm on their faces, the kind of warmth that makes you forget about everything else. They were celebrating 10 years of marriage. A decade of loving each other through job losses, family tragedies, and the quiet, grinding pressure of everyday life. They'd saved for this trip for 3 years. A private sailing charter through the South Pacific. Just the two of them in the open sea. Sarah had always been the dreamer. She talked about this trip the way some people talk about winning the lottery. Michael was more practical, more cautious. But he loved seeing her happy. And out here, thousands of miles from home, she was radiant. They'd been sailing for 4 days, stopping at remote islands, swimming in crystal clear water, eating fresh fish they caught themselves. It felt like a different world. A better one. On the 5th morning, Michael noticed something off. The engine was making a sound it shouldn't. A grinding, stuttering noise that came and went. He checked the fuel lines, the filters, everything he could think of. But he wasn't a mechanic. He was a high school teacher. Sarah told him not to worry. They had a satellite phone. They had emergency supplies. And they were only supposed to be out for 2 more days before heading back to the main island. But that afternoon, the engine died. Michael tried to restart it. Once. Twice. 10 times. Nothing. Just silence and the gentle rocking of the boat. Sarah reached for the satellite phone. She pressed the power button. The screen stayed black. She tried again. Still nothing. The battery was dead. And the backup charger, the solar charger they'd relied on, had cracked 2 days earlier when a wave knocked it off the deck. They looked at each other. Really looked. And for the first time, they felt it. Fear. The wind had been pushing them steadily east, away from the shipping lanes, away from the islands. They'd been drifting for hours without realizing it. Michael opened the navigation system. The GPS showed them nearly 80 miles from the nearest landmass. Too far to swim. Too far to be seen. They had a small emergency radio, but its range was limited. Michael sent out distress calls every hour. No response. Just static. By nightfall, the ocean had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was vast. Empty. Indifferent. Sarah sat in the cabin, trying to stay calm, rationing the water they had left. 2 gallons. Maybe 3 days if they were careful. Michael stood on deck, scanning the horizon for lights. 4 ships. 4 anything. He saw nothing but darkness. That's when he heard it. A soft splash. Then another. He looked over the side of the boat. At first, he thought it was a dolphin. But dolphins don't move like that. Don't circle. Don't wait. The first shark appeared just below the surface. A shadow, maybe 8 feet long. Then another. And another. Within minutes, there were at least a dozen. Bull sharks. reef sharks. And something bigger, something Michael couldn't identify, moving slowly beneath the others. He called Sarah up to the deck. She didn't scream. She just stared. They'd seen sharks before, from a distance, during a dive in Thailand. But this was different. These sharks weren't passing through. They were staying close. Curious. Aggressive. Michael remembered something a guide had told him once. Sharks are attracted to erratic movements, to blood, to distress. He told Sarah not to panic, not to make noise. They went back inside the cabin and locked the door, as if that would help. That night, neither of them slept. They could hear the sharks bumping against the hull. Soft thuds. Testing. Probing. Sarah held Michael's hand so tightly her nails dug into his skin. She whispered, "Why are they still here?" He didn't have an answer. By the second day adrift, the sun had become their enemy. It beat down on the deck without mercy, turning the boat into an oven. They had one small tarp for shade, but it wasn't enough. Their lips cracked. Their skin blistered. The water was running low. Sarah wanted to ration it further, but Michael insisted they drink. Dehydration would kill them faster than starvation. The sharks were still there. More of them now. At least 20, maybe 30. They circled the boat in shifts, some close to the surface, others deeper, barely visible. Michael tried the radio again. Still nothing. He scanned the horizon with binoculars until his eyes ached. No ships. No planes. Just ocean. Endless, hostile ocean. On the third day, Sarah broke down. She started crying, quietly at first, then harder. She said things she didn't mean. That they should have stayed home. That this trip was a mistake. That she was going to die out here. Michael held her, told her they'd be okay, but he didn't believe it himself. He could feel it slipping away. Hope? Control. The belief that they'd make it out alive. That afternoon, they saw a ship. A massive cargo vessel, maybe 3 miles away, moving slowly across the horizon. Michael grabbed the flare gun. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He fired. The flare arced into the sky, a brilliant red streak against the blue. Sarah screamed, waving her arms, shouting even though she knew they couldn't hear her. The ship kept moving. It didn't change course. Didn't slow down. Within 20 minutes, it was gone. Sarah collapsed. She didn't cry this time. She just sat there, staring at the water. Michael wanted to comfort her, but he had nothing left to give. They were both running on fumes. Physically. Emotionally. Spiritually. That night, the sharks got bolder. One of them, a bull shark, thick and muscular, rammed the side of the boat hard enough to knock a cup off the counter inside the cabin. Sarah screamed. Michael grabbed a flashlight and shone it over the side. The shark was directly below them, staring up. Its eyes were black and empty. It didn't swim away. It just hung there, waiting. Michael realized something terrible. The sharks weren't going to leave. They were going to wait for the boat to sink, for the couple to fall in, for the inevitable. On the 4th day, everything fell apart. Sarah had been moving a water jug when she slipped. The jug fell, hit the railing, and tumbled into the ocean. A full gallon. Half of what they had left. Michael lunged for it, but it was already gone, sinking into the blue. Sarah screamed at herself, at the ocean, at God. Michael grabbed her shoulders and told her it was okay, they'd survive, but the words felt hollow. Then his hand started bleeding. He'd cut it on a sharp edge of the railing trying to catch the jug. Not a deep cut, but enough. Blood dripped onto the deck, and then, before he could stop it, into the water. The sharks exploded into motion. The water churned. Fins cut through the surface from every direction. The entire ocean seemed to come alive. Michael wrapped his hand in a shirt, but the damage was done. The sharks were frenzied now, slamming into the boat, thrashing, snapping at the air. One of them leaped halfway out of the water, its jaws open, rows of teeth gleaming in the sunlight. Sarah pulled Michael inside. They locked the door and sat on the floor, breathing hard. The boat rocked violently. Something hit the hull so hard they thought it might crack. Sarah started praying. Michael didn't. He just held her and tried not to think about what would happen if the boat took on water. Hours passed. The frenzy died down, but the sharks stayed close. Michael looked at Sarah. She looked 10 years older. Her face was burned, her eyes sunken. He knew he looked the same. They were dying. Slowly. And the ocean was watching. On the 5th night, Michael made a decision. If a ship came, if a plane flew over, he was going into the water. He'd create a distraction. He'd give Sarah a chance. He didn't tell her. He just held her hand and watched the stars and tried to memorize her face. The 6th morning came with silence. The sharks were still there, but fewer now. Maybe they were losing interest. Or maybe they were just patient. Sarah and Michael had stopped talking. They didn't have the energy. They just sat, side by side, waiting for something to change. And then it did. A sound. Faint at first. A deep, rhythmic thumping. Sarah lifted her head. Michael stood, stumbling on weak legs. A helicopter. Dark green, military markings. It was flying low, maybe half a mile away, moving in their direction. Michael grabbed the flare gun. His last flare. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely load it. He stepped onto the deck, aimed, and fired. The flare shot into the sky, a blazing red star. The helicopter banked. Turned. Headed straight for them. Sarah started sobbing. Michael collapsed to his knees, the flare gun slipping from his hands. The helicopter circled once, and a voice crackled over a loudspeaker. "We see you. Stay calm. We're coming down." A rescue diver dropped into the water. The sharks scattered. Within minutes, Sarah and Michael were being lifted into the helicopter, wrapped in blankets, given water. They couldn't speak. They just held each other and cried. The pilot told them later that they'd been reported missing 3 days earlier when they didn't return to port. A search grid had been established, and they'd been found purely by chance. Another hour, maybe 2, and the helicopter would have turned back. Sarah and Michael spent a week in a hospital in Fiji. Dehydration. Severe sunburn. Malnutrition. But they survived. When they finally flew home, they didn't talk much about what happened. Not to friends. Not to family. Some things are too big for words. But late at night, when the world is quiet, they still think about it. About the sharks. About the ocean. About how close they came to vanishing without a trace. And they think about each other. About the fact that even when hope was gone, even when death felt inevitable, they weren't alone. Because in the end, that's what saved them. Not luck. Not the helicopter. But the knowledge that whatever happened, they'd face it together. The ocean is beautiful. And it is merciless. And it doesn't care whether you live or die. But love does. And sometimes, that's enough.